Hello everyone, this is Anthony from Hadlow College. Very warm welcome to this video. As part of this video we're going to be focusing on turf pests and diseases. A little bit of a revision activity for some, maybe a good opportunity to build on your technical knowledge, and we're going to go into different pests and diseases for each PowerPoint slide. Hope you enjoy the video. Okay, so the first pest we're looking at the moment is common cockchafer or chafer grub. On all the slides, top left-hand corner will have the scientific name. Be important to recognise these scientific names, as they could come up in an exam, or you would be expected to recognise them. Try and do one or two at a time, and hopefully you can build up your knowledge. So it would be a case of trying to learn those as you go as well and reading through them. But as part of the cockchafer grub, this is a larvae. This will eventually turn into a beetle later in the year. Now the cockchafers are a problem. They will feed on the roots, so they'll eat the roots of your turf grass plant, and if you get a high concentration of them in one particular spot, can cause a lot of damage. Slight yellowing of the plant. The grass plant won't be able to uptake nutrients. It won't be able to sort of hold its stability in the soil because the roots hold it in place. One of the other knock-on effects of the cockchafer grubs is that birds, mammals, particularly badgers, will try and find the cockchafers and eat them as a food source, and that can really disrupt the turf, because these other animals will really dig away, could totally obliterate and ruin an area of turf. Often overnight. They're nocturnal animals, so they will be doing it overnight, and you come in the morning and see the mess that they've made, unfortunately. But that is the cockchafer. Okay, so the pest we're looking at here is earthworms. I mean, you could argue that these are very beneficial for the soil system, for the turf system. In many ways they are, creating drainage systems, degrading fat, organic matter as well. But the main problem with them is that when they come up to the surface, some species form the small mounds on top of the surface, and if those aren't removed, it will have a big impact on ball roll, particularly for golf, and become unsightly. They can also get in cylinder mowers and reels of mowers and just sort of mask and smear the surface. So removal of them is imperative before mowing. There are many different ways of removing them or trying to reduce the population of worms. I mean, a lot of it impacts on trying to reduce their food cycle, how much food is available to them. So not returning our clippings, watering, how much fertilizer we're putting down. All of these have a huge impact on the amount of worms that are in the soil. The pest we're looking at the moment is the tubular species, often known as a leather jacket, and then eventually it will become a crane fly or a daddy longlegs. And I'm just going to talk you through the life cycle of these, just so we get a full understanding. So first of all, we'll start off with the egg. The egg hatches. The egg will turn into the leather jacket that you can see at the moment. Looks like a smallish worm, probably about 1 inch to 1.5 inches long. Has sort of a coil around it as well, and ever so slightly darker colour than a worm. But have a look for those coils, particularly on both images here. You can see those that make it quite distinct from your regular earthworm. The leather jacket here at this stage is the most causes a lot of damage to the turf. It's not the eggs or the daddy longlegs that causes the damage to the turf, but at this stage they will feed off the roots of the turf. They'll munch away at them, Also, a knock-on effect is that you could get birds pecking for them and other sort of animals or mammals trying to find those leather jackets and eat them, which can be a problem in itself. You could get yellowing of the turf. You could get lots of turf ripped up, especially around sort of the crown of the plant can be quite damaged. And sort of in the summer, particularly late summer, these will they'll turn into the daddy longlegs or the crane fly, and they'll sort of emerge from the leather jacket. So quite an interesting species, one of the most sort of damaging to turf systems, probably one of the most difficult pests to control as well. But that's the leather jacket. Okay, so the next pest we're looking at, this is your common mole. These can come out overnight and form a large heap of earth on the surface, about the size of a football or a rugby ball, very fresh soil at the top. Not only do they cause the sort of mound of earth, but they can also cause sort of like tunnels where they can become sunken, those tunnels, so the ground will sort of dip where they've burrowed. So this image here has actually been taken with a microscope, looking very closely at nematodes. There are many different species of nematodes, almost like very small worms. Some of them can be beneficial. Some of them the parasitic nematodes can pierce roots, and that can cause lots of different problems. Can be yellowing of the turf, but ultimately you end up with a very poor, weak root system. The next image we're looking at is rabbits, fairly common, but their burrowing action can cause a lot of problems to turf, make it unstable, very difficult to repair. Typical on golf courses, on bunker edges, on sort of peripheral areas where they're trying to just get in, really. Could be on the edge of a lawn. You don't normally find them right in the middle of areas. They tend to sort of go to areas around the outside of gardens or sports turf areas or pitches, but can be a pest nonetheless. Okay, so we're now going on to the diseases, turf grass diseases, and the first disease that we're looking at is anthracnose. Can be two different forms of anthracnose, basal rot and foliar blight. These can occur at different times of year and under different weather conditions, but mostly affects annual meadowgrass, Parannua. The basal rot, if you look very carefully, particularly at the image on the left-hand side, you can see sort of a yellowing of the base of the plant, and this can almost go to sort of a blackish rotting colour, very base. With the foliar blight, the symptoms appear as irregular white or yellow-brown patches, and they can almost turn sort of a tan colour before the plant dies. The next disease we're looking at here is dollar spot. You tend to find this a lot when I've had sort of wet, damp conditions, more of a summer disease than any other time of year or winter. The main identifying symptom is that the yellowing, sort of a yellow blotch of the turf. And it's called dollar spot because they tend to be in sort of dollar-sized yellow patches on the turf. You need to look at it from above, really, but the real key factor is looking for that dollar-sized spot, that yellow spot. Okay, so this image is quite complex, but we've got three different types of fairy rings: type 1, type 2 and type 3, and we'll go through those now. The type 1, you tend to get very dry, hydrophobic soil in the ring, kind of almost yellowing of the turf. The turf may completely die, and the ring is very yellow, very poor wheat growth. very dry if you were to stand on it. You may even see cracks in the surface. Type 2 is almost the opposite of type 1. You get sort of excess growth, perhaps greener growth, where a substance called lignin has actually been released from the soil, been broken down very quickly, and you get very flush growth from that ring. So you get sort of a almost better turf quality within the ring itself. The last ring, type 3, you get the fruiting bodies, almost like the sort of mushroom fungi that you typically see, and that they are fungi, and that would be type 3. So try and remember all three of them, very distinctively quite different, but they all form the ring shape. Start off very small, and over time they sort of expand and spread out. This image now is showing a type 1 fairy ring. You can see the distinct rings, you can see the sort of darkening yellow-ish of the soil, and that will be very hydrophobic, be very difficult to wet the soil there. Any water will sort of bead on the surface and won't penetrate through the soil, be very difficult to get through into the root zone. This next image is to show a type 2 fairy ring. You can see sort of a darkening of the leaf, more flush and excess growth. And this last image of the fairy rings is a type 3 fairy ring. You can see the fruiting bodies in a clear sort of ring on the surface, and they're the fruiting bodies. This disease here is called microdochium patch, commonly referred to in the UK also as fusarium patch. This disease starts off with mycelium, the white bodies, the very white. You can almost see on the image on the left, you've got the mycelium around the very edge of the patches. Those patches are yellowy brown colour. Over time the mycelium disappears and the yellow brown scars are left. Probably the most common disease, well, it definitely is the most common disease on UK golf greens, and probably the more common turf grass disease that we have to deal with in this country. It loves damp conditions, loves sort of mild autumn and winter conditions. Frost, it doesn't particularly like frost, so often people are sort of happy to see frost when it appears, and sort of dew doesn't help it. There's sort of quite often in the mornings people go around and dew their greens off, dew the football pitches and rugby pitches to try and remove it off the surface. But any sort of trying to increase light, trying to improve airflow certainly helps reduce the sporing bodies for this this turf disease. The next turf grass disease we're looking at is red thread. If you look very closely at the image, you'll be able to see these pink and reddish like thread sort of structures, very small, but if you look closely you can quite clearly see the colour difference in them, and this is a very common disease in the UK. We tend to get it more in sort of the spring, summer, maybe even autumn, but don't tend to see it so much in the winter. Now quite an easy remedy for this would be to apply nitrogen-based fertiliser. That tends to knock it, improves the turf quality, and removes the disease. Encourages a lot more growth, so it recovers and repairs quickly as well. You also want to try and remove dew from the surface, and try and sort of get a bit, reduce humidity. So anything you can do to improve light, improve airflow once again, try and remove the early morning dew as well. That will certainly help. Reducing irrigation inputs as well will certainly help get rid of this disease. This disease we're looking at now is called take-all patch. I'd say it would be the largest disease. You can see from the image that there's a pen in the middle of it. And it's in terms of diameter, you're probably looking at the size of a dustbin lid, or 2 or 3 of those pens across in terms of diameter. It tends to affect bent grass the most, and it usually will appear in the summer when conditions are quite warm, quite hot. So July, August, maybe early September, you'll see the disease. Starts off fairly small and then spreads out, almost a sort of reddening, yellow, bronzing of the turf. And as I say, the size would be the main factor that would distinguish it here from the other diseases.